Imagine a world where every human species that has ever lived coexisted in the same timeline. Homo sapiens throwing nuts to the robust hominins, Neanderthals laughing at the awkward gait of the Australopiths, while Homo erectus scare off mischievous Australopithecus juveniles with fire. Although this may seem like an intriguing universe, it remains purely a fantasy. In an ever-changing world, evolution works by gradually replacing older species with newer ones that are better adapted for survival. Essentially, older species give rise to newer ones before succumbing to various environmental pressures. There wouldn't have been so many human species in the first place if an earlier human species, like Australopithecus, could perfectly survive everything the hostile Earth threw at them. Meanwhile, this doesn't mean that some human species didn't coexist with others, at least for a while. That would be like saying it's impossible for someone to have met their cousins and great-grandparents who lived really long before passing. In fact, modern humans coexisted with at least 8 different human species, including the famous Neanderthals, before they eventually went extinct. Now that we've explored the significance of extinction, let's break down the specific factors behind the disappearance of our long-lost relatives. Scientists believe there were multiple factors at play during the extinction of other human species. These pressures combined to create an extinction force so powerful for even species like Homo erectus and Homo habilis, who had adapted to diverse environments to resist. Among these factors, climate change tops the list. Like every other extinct species, earlier hominins weren't immune to climate shifts. These changes in the atmospheric conditions were rapid, making it even more difficult for them to adapt on time. One way by which the climatic fluctuations shaped the fate of our extinct relatives was through changing habitats. As the Earth's climate danced between ice ages and warmer interglacial periods, what used to be the natural habitats of other human species became alien regions. Grasslands turned into deserts, forests disappeared, and ice sheets expanded or melted, reshaping ecosystems. Many human species, such as Homo erectus and Neanderthals, relied on specific environments for food, shelter, and hunting grounds. When these habitats changed, they found it difficult to survive. Climate change also contributed to resource scarcity through the collapse of ecosystems that supported large herbivores, such as bison, mammoth, elk, and reindeer. This plague affected species like Neanderthals, who were primarily hunters. Suddenly, they found their food sources reducing considerably during colder periods, leading to malnutrition and population decline. Similarly, Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, who had island habitats, might have faced starvation due to rising sea levels and reduced biodiversity. Earlier, primarily herbivorous genuses like Australopithecus, Australopithecus, and Paranthropus also ran out of their main food sources as the climatic fluctuations reshaped their habitats. Another way climate change might have pushed other human species to extinction was through temperature extremes. Extreme cold during glacial periods or intense heat in other regions may have directly affected survival. Species without advanced clothing, shelter, or fire-making skills, such as Homo habilis, and less adapted earlier hominins, like the Australopiths, were particularly vulnerable. The resulting heat stress or frostbites from the extreme temperatures would have made life unbearable, especially for species with limited geographical ranges. Furthermore, the Denisovans who possibly lived on high altitudes might have been affected by special climate changes that made mountainous regions inhospitable. The shifting weather patterns could have disrupted their food chains and reduced their populations. The The next major driving force behind the extinction of our lost relatives was the competition with Homo sapiens. Modern humans evolved to become the most adaptable and resourceful of the hominins. Thus, they outperformed their evolutionary cousins in numerous ways, which eventually drove them to extinction. This competition wasn't limited to direct conflict. It involved the battle for resources, habitat, and survival strategies. Homo sapiens had superior tools and weapons that gave them an edge in hunting and gathering resources. They developed sophisticated spears, bows, and later projectile weapons from bone, antler, and flint that allowed for more efficient hunting. On the other hand, Neanderthals and Homo erectus often relied on more rudimentary stone tools. Homo sapiens also had more complex social structures and superior communication abilities. The development of spoken language allowed sapiens to share information, coordinate hunts, and plan more effectively. Ultimately, they were able to form larger, well-organized groups that enabled them to dominate territories and emerge victorious in the competition with other species. Species like Neanderthals, who usually lived in smaller, isolated groups, stood no chance. Furthermore, Homo sapiens were always on the move and occupied diverse environments, pushing other species into less hospitable regions. This limited the range and resources available to coexisting hominins like the Denisovans. Although there's less evidence of outright violent conflict, it's plausible that modern humans engaged in direct physical confrontations with other species for territories and out of aggression. It's far-fetched that Homo sapiens were the only human species that drove others to extinction through competition. Other members of the Homo genus, including Homo habilis and Homo erectus, may have contributed to the disappearance of Australopithecus africanus and the robust hominins, respectively. As the common saying goes, history repeats itself. Another factor that may have contributed to the disappearance of other species was widespread diseases. The wild migration of modern humans out of Africa into Europe, Asia, and beyond may have introduced pathogens to other human species that had no immunity against such diseases. The isolated Neanderthals and Denisovans, who had smaller populations and limited genetic diversity, would have been particularly vulnerable to outbreaks. Even a single epidemic could decimate these groups who were already struggling with other problems, like dwindling resources. Apart from killing them outright, diseases could also result in a reduction in their birth rate and cause chronic illnesses, ultimately decreasing their population. One contemporary example of this was when the European colonizers first contacted the long-isolated Native Americans. They eventually overwhelmed them with smallpox and other diseases that decimated their populations. Interbreeding and assimilation might have also forced other human species to vanish into thin air. Genetic evidence suggests that Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. About 1 to 2% of the DNA in people of European and Asian descent comes from Neanderthals. Similarly, significant Denisovan markers are found in populations in Oceania, Southeast Asia, and parts of East Asia, showing that they also contribute to the modern human gene pool. This interbreeding wasn't a one-time thing, and thus likely diluted their distinct populations over time, absorbing them into the growing Homo sapiens population. Isolation and small population sizes were also at play in the extinction of some earlier hominins. Human species confined to specific regions usually face limited access to resources and opportunities for genetic exchange. The hobbit lived on the isolated island of Flores in Indonesia with limited resources, a small population size, and no possibility of migration to escape environmental changes. Similarly, Denisovans were geographically scattered in the remote, high-altitude areas of Siberia and the Tibetan Plateau, making it challenging to maintain genetic diversity or sustain large populations. The small population sizes of species like Neanderthals and the hobbit led to inbreeding, reducing genetic diversity and increasing the prevalence of harmful genetic mutations. Over time, this genetic bottleneck weakened the overall health and resilience of the species through weakened immune systems and congenital disorders. Limited population sizes could also lead to an Ali effect, where individuals may struggle to find mates, leading to low reproduction rates and further reproduction decline. Small isolated populations are also more likely to be wiped out by localized events such as diseases, food shortages, or natural disasters. Even the once resilient Homo erectus, who lived for nearly 2 million years, eventually bowed out to extinction when they became increasingly confined to specific regions like Java, where the environmental changes and their competition with modern humans became worse. Furthermore, smaller isolated groups had fewer opportunities to develop or adopt new technologies, leaving them at a disadvantage. This brings us to another key factor that likely played a role in the extinction of many ancient human species: lack of sophisticated technology and cognitive abilities. The survival and success of ancient human species often depended on their ability to innovate and adapt through technology. Technology comprises tools, weapons, clothing, fire-making, and medicine, crucial for thriving in the challenging times. While modern humans consistently advanced in these areas, thanks to a more complex brain, other human species lag behind. If not for these qualities, our very own species would have been lost to be remembered only through fossils and genetic studies. However, technology has placed Homo sapiens at the peak of the human evolutionary tree and made the species capable of shaping its fate even in unfavorable conditions. Homo sapiens developed and used advanced hunting tools, including spears, bows, and other projectiles that allowed them to hunt effectively from a distance. These tools also reduced risk and expanded their range of prey. Meanwhile, Neanderthals used thrusting spears for hunting, which often required close contact with prey, increasing the risk of injury and limiting their hunting efficiency. Homo erectus used more rudimentary tools like hand axes and flakes, which restricted their abilities to hunt large or fast-moving animals effectively. Limited hunting technology reduced access to protein-rich diets, leading to malnutrition and smaller populations in other species. As suggested earlier, technology also determines a species' ability to adapt to changing environments. Homo sapiens innovated tools to exploit new resources: fishing gear for aquatic environments, complex clothing to survive in colder climates, and storage techniques to preserve food for harsher seasons. Meanwhile, species like Homo floresiensis were heavily dependent on specific resources in isolated habitats, meaning they couldn't efficiently exploit alternative resources. Despite being well suited to cold climates, Neanderthals struggled to adapt to rapidly changing environments after the Ice Age. Many early members of the human lineage also lacked fire control and use. For Homo sapiens, fire provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food, which improved digestion and nutrient absorption. It also enabled the species to expand into colder regions and survive harsh conditions. Species like Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis may not have used fire consistently. Meanwhile, Neanderthals, who occasionally used fire, lacked the widespread mastery and innovation associated with modern humans. Without reliable fire, species were limited in their diet and ability to occupy diverse habitats. Other human species also likely had inferior social technologies. Modern humans' grasp of complex language, art, and shared knowledge were vital for innovation. Language allowed sapiens to share ideas, refine tools, and plan hunts more efficiently. Similarly, art and symbols enabled cultural transmission and long-term knowledge retention. While evidence suggests that Neanderthals had some symbolic behavior, it was less complex than that of modern humans. Earlier species like Homo erectus and Homo naledi lacked the cognitive and cultural frameworks for advanced social innovation. The inability to share and preserve knowledge meant these species could not build on or improve existing technologies, making them helpless when problems came knocking. There was also the issue of limited shelter and clothing. Homo sapiens created tailored clothing and built durable shelters to survive in extreme climates, from Ice Age Europe to arid deserts. Neanderthals sometimes lived in caves, which were not always the best shelters, and used raw animal hides, which made their clothing less effective in insulating against extreme cold. Earlier species like Homo erectus and Homo habilis had little evidence of clothing or sophisticated shelters. Without adequate protection, these species were vulnerable to harsh weather, reducing their survival rates. Another force of extinction was predators. Predators likely played a role in the extinction or decline of some earlier human species, particularly those with smaller populations, limited technology, or less advanced social structures. Early human species like Australopithecus afarensis and Ardipithecus ramidus were physically smaller and slower compared to modern humans, making them more vulnerable to predation. These species lacked advanced tools or weapons, relying mostly on natural defenses such as climbing trees to escape predators. They also had smaller brain sizes and less advanced problem-solving skills, limiting their ability to outsmart predators or create effective defenses. Small, isolated groups like the Hobbit faced higher risks from local predators, as they had fewer individuals to form protective groups and defend against attacks. Some predators that threatened early humans include saber-toothed cats, which likely hunted early hominins in open savannas and forests, hyenas, lions, leopards, crocodiles, and birds of prey, as seen in the case of the Tuong child, an Australopithecus afarensis specimen believed to be killed by an eagle. For evolution to occur, some populations must die off for newer, more adaptable ones to arise. Just as Homo ergaster gave rise to Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis were likely the direct ancestors of modern humans and Neanderthals. Without our extinct ancestors and cousins paving the way for us, we probably wouldn't be here to share this story. If you enjoyed this video, get ready because a new documentary titled All Types of Human Species Explained will soon be released on our channel. So, subscribe and turn on the notification bell now to make sure you don't miss it and stay updated on our upcoming prehistoric and scientific documentaries. Bye for now!